Ahoy, cruise enthusiasts. Okay, the hantavirus or the Andes virus is still in the news. The incident aboard the MV Hondias that's been playing out over the last couple of weeks, and saw a story about some Australian passengers who had been returned to Australia were looking into seeking compensation for the events that had transpired, and got me wondering who is paying for all of this, with everything involved in what happens on board, the repatriation, the quarantine, and everything like that. And it turns out it's actually pretty simple. Every government with their citizens on board the ship is paying for the repatriation and quarantine of their own citizens. And in terms of that, it really is that simple. Before we continue, though, if you like these sort of almost no-holds-barred talks about cruising and related items, go ahead and hit that subscribe button below. I'm not going to ask you to hit the bell. I don't do it for anybody, so I won't ask it of you. Also, if you find the information interesting, at least, go ahead and leave a like. It really does help. Okay. Nationals on board the MV Hondias. Okay, so nationals from the major countries, or the major countries with people on board the MV Hondias that we know of so far have been the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, Spain, Australia, the US, Switzerland, France, South Africa, Canada, Germany, Singapore, Turkey, not Taiwan, apparently. There was a rumor about Taiwan, but apparently that's not the case. And actually, apparently a UK national who was living on St. Helena was on board. So everybody who was on the ship has been returned to their country, and these costs have been covered by that national government. For instance, here in the U.S., HHS put out a statement, a little over a week ago. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, through the, get this, Administration for Strategic Preparedness and Response, that one we know about, and Center for Disease Control, is supporting the U.S. Department of State in the repatriation of American citizens from the MV Hondias cruise ship affected by the Andes variant of the hantavirus. In coordination with interagency partners, these American citizens will be transported by the Department of State airlift to the United States. The airlift will first transport passengers to the ASPR Regional Emerging Special Pathogen Treatment Center at the University of Nebraska Medical Center in Omaha, Nebraska. Is it in Nebraska? I think so. Okay. Then continuing on to other destinations to transport remaining passengers, said HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Okay, so yes. Every country is handling the repatriation and quarantine costs for their citizens. Why are they doing this? Well, probably because it's the right thing to do, but it is also a requirement of the 2005 International Health Regulations, which is effectively a treaty because of our membership in the World Health Organization. So, yes, everybody who is a member of this, all 216 member states, have agreed to cover the costs of these incidents because it has been declared a public health emergency, which is when these regulations and requirements kick in. So, all the passengers, they are not on the hook for these costs. The cruise line is not on the hook for the costs, and neither is any travel insurance that they might have. They're all being paid for by their national government. So that is who is paying for the response. So, okay, you know what? This is good. This is actually a good thing. This is not the time to argue about things like that, especially when you have an actually serious situation to deal with. Serious for the people involved, not for, people at large. I'm still not worried at all about this. I still absolutely would go on an expedition cruise. I still will take a cruise to Antarctica that will likely leave from Ushuaia, Argentina. So, this doesn't dissuade me at all one bit. But then there is the case of the Australians that are seeking compensation, and I just saw this as well today. Basically, a group of Australians who are currently in quarantine in Perth could try to seek compensation under Australian consumer law, legal experts have said, but a lawyer who led the class action in the Thing era aboard Ruby Princess has warned the cruise company would likely argue that Australian law held no jurisdiction over the matter. Kind of makes sense. The 6 passengers will spend 3 weeks in quarantine at the Bullsbrook Center for National Resilience, about 40 kilometers northeast of Perth. Okay, so yes, of course, when anything like this happens, people want to sue somebody. Here's the thing. They are not eligible for any compensation around the quarantine or any of those expenses. Those are picked up by the national government, so they definitely can't seek compensation as that, which means they really legitimately would only be able to seek compensation from anyone else, particularly the cruise line, as if this were a normal travel disruption. Basically, any prepaid flights or hotels or services that they had in upcoming destinations, or any cost they incurred for, their travels beyond arrival in Europe. Right? Those are the only things they could seek compensation for. So, folks, get travel insurance. Seriously, get travel insurance. Now, is the cruise line responsible for this? To me, no. Why would they be? Right? This is not something that they could reasonably have protected for, and there's nothing reasonable that they could have done to actually prevent this. Call this a force majeure, right? An act of God. It's something that just happens. Screening for things like the Andes virus coming out of South America is just not something that's done. There probably are no protocols on board the ship that could have prevented it. Any sanitation requirements that we're all used to after the other thing. Given the intimacy required to spread the Andes virus human to human, there's nothing the cruise line could have done about that. And as for the care on board the ship, I'm sure they did everything they could, everything that was reasonably within protocols, because it was only later that we found out that it was the Andes virus, and I'm sure that's probably one of the last things they were thinking about. People get sick, on cruise ships all the time, particularly people of advanced age. So they probably just gave them the standard treatment protocol, only later to find out what the actual circumstance was. So I don't think there was a failure of care aboard the ship, which is the only thing that these passengers would really have, a way to claim any compensation against the cruise line for. So there you go. Actually, pretty easy to find out. All the quarantine and repatriation costs are being covered by the national government. Any travel disruption costs, I get travel insurance. If they had it, I hope they file a claim and it is successfully paid. I actually think it should be. And, any attempt to hold the cruise line responsible for, handling this outbreak, I don't see it. I just don't see it happening. So there you go. Well, all right. Yeah. If you found this information in any way useful, go ahead. Please leave a like. And you know what? Again, not a reason to be afraid. So if you are out there enjoying your exploration or expedition cruise, you know what? I hope we both see a penguin when we are out of the cabin.